Jake Morrison stood at the viewing window of the transport ship and watched Kepler Station grow larger ahead of them. The massive space station looked like a metal city floating in the darkness. Its lights blinked like stars, and ships moved around it like tiny insects. "First time seeing the station?" asked the pilot, a blue-skinned alien with 4 eyes. "Yes," Jake said. His voice was quiet and steady. He did not show the nervousness he felt inside. Jake was 28 years old and had been a Marine for 10 years. He was not tall or especially strong-looking, but his eyes were sharp and alert. A scar ran along his left arm from his elbow to his wrist. His hands were steady, and he moved with the careful grace of someone who had seen combat. 3 months ago, Earth's military leaders had chosen him for something special. They called it the Crucible Program. It was a training course for the best warriors from all over the galaxy. Only 15% of students finished the program. Most quit. Some got hurt so badly they could never fight again. "Why did they pick you?" His commanding officer had asked him before he left Earth. Jake had thought about it for a long time. "I don't quit," he had said finally. Now, as the transport ship docked with Kepler Station, Jake wondered if that would be enough. The station was huge inside. The corridors were wide enough for creatures much larger than humans. Jake saw beings he had never imagined before. Some walked on 4 legs. Others had wings. One group had skin that looked like rocks. They all wore military uniforms of different colors and styles. Jake followed the signs to the Crucible Program training area. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. Other new students walked the same direction. Some talked loudly in languages Jake did not understand. Others, like Jake, stayed quiet. The training hall was enormous. The ceiling was so high Jake could barely see it. The floor was covered with thick mats. Weapons hung on the walls. Training equipment filled one corner. At the far end, a group of instructors waited. Jake had studied files about the instructors before coming to the station. Most were from the Kavari race. The Kavari were warriors who had never lost a war. They were tall and strong, with skin like armor and 4 arms each. They trained the hardest soldiers in the galaxy. "Welcome to the Crucible Program," said a voice that echoed through the hall. The speaker stepped forward. He was the biggest Kavari Jake had ever seen, even in pictures. He stood over 7 feet tall. His dark skin looked like it was made of thick plates. His 4 arms ended in hands with claws instead of fingernails. When he moved, Jake could hear the soft scraping sound of his skin plates rubbing together. "I am Instructor Vexhai," the giant said. His voice was deep and rough. "For the next 6 months, I will decide if you are worthy to call yourselves warriors." Jake counted the other students. There were 43 of them from 20 different species. Some looked confident. Others looked scared. A few looked angry, as if they had something to prove. "Most of you will fail," Vexhai continued. "You will break. You will cry. You will beg to go home. This is good. Better to learn you are weak here than to die in real battle." The instructor's 4 eyes moved across the group of students. When his gaze stopped on Jake, the human felt like he was being studied by a predator. "You," Vexhai said, pointing one clawed finger at Jake. "Human, come here." Jake walked forward. He kept his back straight and his steps even. He had learned long ago that showing fear only made things worse. "What is your name?" Vexhai asked. "Jake Morrison, sir." "Humans are weak," Vexhai said to the other students, as if Jake was not there. "They break easily. Their bones are soft. Their skin tears like paper. They cry when they are hurt." Jake said nothing. He had heard worse before. "I will show you the proper fighting stance," Vexhai said. "Human, face me." Jake turned to face the instructor. He could smell something like metal and ozone coming from the Kavari's skin. When facing an enemy, HFY said to the class, you must show dominance immediately. Jake saw the attack coming. HFY's bottom right hand moved in a quick arc toward Jake's face. Most people would have stepped back or raised their hands to block. Jake had been in too many fights to make that mistake. Instead, Jake planted his feet and kept his hands at his sides. The blow hit him full in the face. He heard his nose break with a wet cracking sound. Pain exploded through his skull. Blood poured down his face and dripped onto the mat. The hall went completely silent. Jake stood still for a moment, letting the pain wash over him. Then he reached up with both hands, gripped his broken nose, and pulled it back into place. The sound was loud and ugly. More blood flowed, but Jake did not make a sound. He wiped the blood from his mouth with the back of his hand and looked directly into HFY's 4 eyes. When do we start the real training, sir? Jake asked. His voice was steady. There was no anger in it, no fear, no pain. Just a simple question. For the first time since Jake had entered the hall, HFY was quiet. The instructor's 4 eyes studied Jake's face. The human's nose was crooked now and still bleeding, but his eyes were calm and alert. Interesting, HFY said finally. Very interesting. Jake could feel the other students staring at him. Some looked shocked. Others looked impressed. A few looked afraid, but Jake thought they might be afraid of him, not the instructor. Clean yourself up, HFY said. Training begins in 1 hour. As Jake walked toward the washrooms, he heard whispers. Behind him, he did not turn around. He had work to do. In the mirror, Jake looked at his reflection. His nose was definitely broken and would heal crooked. His face was covered in drying blood, but his eyes were the same as always. Steady, ready. He had survived. The first day. Only 179 days to go. 2 weeks passed, and Jake learned that the broken nose was just the beginning. Every morning, HFY called Jake forward for demonstrations. Every morning, Jake got hurt. The instructor broke his left wrist during a lesson about joint locks. He cracked 2 of Jake's ribs while showing proper striking technique. He gave Jake a concussion during a class about avoiding head injuries. Each time, Jake got back up. Each time, he reset his own bones or walked off the pain. Each time, he asked the same question. When do we start the real training, sir? The other students began to watch Jake differently. Some looked at him with respect. Others seemed afraid. A few appeared curious, as if Jake was a puzzle they wanted to solve. Why do you let him do this to you? Asked Zeph, a young alien with green skin and large black eyes. Zeph was from a species called the Altarians. They were peaceful people who rarely fought, but Zeph had volunteered for the program to protect his homeworld. Jake was sitting in the medical bay, waiting for the yell. Automated systems to finish healing his latest injuries. His ribs were wrapped in regeneration bandages that hummed softly as they worked. He's testing me, Jake said. Testing you for what? Jake thought about it. Back on Earth, his drill sergeants had done similar things, though not as extreme. They pushed recruits to find their breaking point. Most people had one. Jake had learned long ago that his breaking point was much further away than most people expected. He wants to know if I quit, Jake said. But why keep hurting you? Jake looked at Zeph. The young alien reminded him of soldiers he had known who died in humanity's first contact war. Good people who signed up to protect others, even though they were scared. Because pain is temporary, Jake said. But quitting lasts forever. By the 4th week, Jake had made 2 friends. Zeph was one. The other was Lisa Park, a human demolitions expert who had arrived in the second group of students. Lisa was small and quick, with short black hair and hands that were always steady, even when handling explosives. Morrison, you're either the toughest son of a gun I've ever met, or the dumbest," Lisa said one evening as they ate dinner in the station's cafeteria. "Maybe both," Jake said. His voice sounded different now, because his nose had healed crooked. "Vex High broke a Thorian's arm yesterday," Lisa said. "The Thorian quit and went home. Those guys are 8 feet tall and made of muscle." Jake nodded. He had seen it happen. The Thorian student had been tough, but after Vex High shattered his arm bone, the big alien had screamed and begged to leave the program. "So why haven't you quit?" Lisa asked. Jake looked around the cafeteria. Students from dozens of species sat at different tables. Some laughed and joked. Others looked tired and beaten down. A few sat alone, probably thinking about going home. "I made a promise," Jake said. "To who?" "To some friends who can't keep promises anymore." Lisa did not ask what that meant. Soldiers understood about promises to the dead. The real change started in week 6. Jake was sparring with a Kavari student named Hexter. The Kavari student was younger than Vex High, but still much bigger and stronger than Jake. He had been beating Jake easily for 10 minutes, but Jake was learning. Every time Hexter hit him, Jake studied the angle and timing. Every time he got knocked down, Jake noticed how the Kavari moved. Humans might be weaker, but they were good at adapting. Hexter threw a punch with his upper right arm. Jake had seen this exact punch dozens of times before. This time, instead of trying to block or dodge, Jake stepped inside the punch and drove his elbow into Hexter's ribs. The Kavari student made a surprised grunt and stumbled backward. "Good," said Vex High from the side of the mat. "The human is finally learning." But Jake was learning more than just fighting techniques. He was learning about his classmates. Zeph was fast, but afraid to hurt anyone. Lisa was smart, but sometimes took too many risks. The Thorian students were strong, but slow to change tactics. Jake started helping other students during their free time. He showed Zeph how to be aggressive without being cruel. He taught Lisa some tricks about staying calm under pressure that he had learned in the Marines. "Why are you helping them?" Vex High asked one day after Jake had spent an hour working with 3 struggling students. "Because we're stronger together," Jake said. Vex High's 4 eyes studied Jake for a long moment. "Humans," he said, as if the word explained everything. By week 8, something had changed in the training hall. Jake was still getting hurt regularly, but now other students were watching him more carefully. They saw how he dealt with pain. They saw how he never gave up. They saw how he helped others, even when he was injured himself. More importantly, Jake was starting to predict Vex High's attacks. The instructor's movements followed patterns. He had favorite techniques and preferred angles of attack. Jake began, moving a split second before Vex High struck, reducing the damage. "You're getting better at this," Lisa said after watching Jake avoid the worst of a particularly vicious combination attack. "I'm getting better at him," Jake corrected during a teen exercise in week 8. Jake's squad was assigned to capture a position defended by senior students. The defenders were bigger, more experienced, and better armed. Most teams had failed this exercise completely. Jake studied the problem for 20 minutes. Then he divided his squad into 3 groups. Zeph would create a distraction on the left. Lisa would set charges on the right to make noise and confusion. Jake would lead the main attack up the middle, but only after the defenders had moved to deal with the distractions. "This plan is crazy," said Brector, a 4-armed student from a warrior species. "The humans will get us all killed." "Trust me," Jake said. The plan worked perfectly. While the defenders rushed to stop Zeph's loud but harmless distraction and Lisa's explosive diversion, Jake led 4 students straight through the middle of their defenses. They captured the objective in 12 minutes, faster than any team in the program's history. Vex High watched the whole exercise from an observation. deck. When it was over, he came down to the training floor. "Interesting tactics," he said to Jake. "Thank you, sir." "I did not say they were good tactics," Vex-High said. "I said they were interesting." But Jake noticed that Vex-High studied the recording of the exercise 3 times that evening. That night, as Jake lay in his bunk with fresh bandages covering new bruises, he thought about home. Earth felt very far away. His old life as a Marine seemed like something that had happened to someone else. But he was changing, and he could feel it. Every day he got a little faster, a little smarter, a little harder to break. His body was adapting to the station's varied gravity fields and the constant physical stress. His mind was learning to think like the aliens around him while still keeping the human ability to find new solutions to old problems. More than that, he was starting to understand Vex-High. The instructor was not just cruel. He was testing Jake in ways that went beyond simple physical toughness. Every lesson had a purpose. Every beating taught something new. Jake was beginning to suspect that Vex-High was not trying to break him anymore. The instructor was trying to forge him into something new. The question was, what? 3 months into the program, Jake Morrison had become someone different. His broken nose had healed with a permanent crook that made his face look harder. Scars marked his arms and chest from dozens of training injuries. His muscles had adapted to the station's changing gravity fields, making him stronger and faster than he had ever been on Earth. But the biggest change was in his eyes. They had always been alert, but now they held a dangerous calm that made even the larger alien students step carefully around him. "You move differently now," Lisa said one morning as they warmed up for training. "Like you're hunting something." Jake paused in his stretching routine. "Maybe I am." The truth was that Jake had begun to read Vex-High like a book. After 3 months of daily beatings, he knew every one of the instructor's favorite attacks. He could predict when Vex-High would strike and how. More importantly, he had started to see the weak points in the Kavari's seemingly perfect technique. Vex-High was strong and fast, but he was also proud. He had favorite moves that he used over and over. His 4 arms gave him advantages, but they also created patterns that could be exploited. His armored skin was tough, but Jake had noticed places where the plates met that might be vulnerable. "Today, we practice advanced combat techniques," Vex-High announced to the class. Only 23 students remained from the original 43. The others had quit, been injured too badly to continue, or in 3 cases, been removed from the program for failing to meet basic standards. "Human," Vex-High said, pointing at Jake. "Come forward." Jake walked to the center of the mat. Their routine was familiar now. Vex-High would use him to demonstrate a technique. Jake would get hurt. The class would learn what not to do. "Today I will show you the Kavari death grip," Vex-High said. "This technique can crush the bones in an opponent's neck." Jake stood ready. He had learned not to tense up before Vex-High's attacks. Tension made the injuries worse. Vex-High moved with his usual speed, all 4 arms reaching for Jake's throat. But this time, Jake was ready in a way he had never been. Before, he had seen this exact attack sequence 17 times over the past month. He knew exactly where each hand would be. Instead of trying to block or escape, Jake stepped forward and slightly to the left. Vex-High's hands closed on empty air where Jake's neck had been a moment before. Jake's right elbow drove upward into the soft spot where 2 of Vex-High's armor plates met under his left arm. The instructor made a sound like surprised air escaping from a pressure tank. He stumbled backward 3 steps. The training hall went completely silent. Jake straightened up and looked at Vex-High. The instructor's 4 eyes were wide with surprise. A thin line of dark blue blood ran from the corner of his mouth. "Interesting," Vex-High said after a long moment. He wiped the blood away with the back of one hand. Very interesting indeed. The other students stared at Jake with new expressions. Some looked impressed. Others looked afraid. A few looked like they were seeing him for the first time. Continue training, HFY said to the class. Practice the basic combinations we learned yesterday. But Jake noticed that the instructor watched him for the rest of the session. Not with the predatory gaze of a hunter studying prey, but with the careful attention of one warrior evaluating another. That evening, Jake found himself training alone in one of the smaller practice rooms. He worked through combat sequences, mixing human military techniques with alien fighting styles he had learned from watching his classmates. You have been studying, said a voice behind him. Jake turned to see HFY standing in the doorway. The instructor was not wearing his usual training gear. Instead, he wore a simple robe that made him look less threatening and more like a teacher. Yes, sir, Jake said. What have you learned? Jake thought about the question. It seemed important, in a way that went beyond simple curiosity. I learned that strength is not just about being big or fast, Jake said. It's about knowing when to use what you have. HFY stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. What else? I learned that every fighter has patterns, even the best ones. If you watch long enough, you can see them. And Jake hesitated. The next part was dangerous to say out loud. I learned that you have been teaching me things you did not teach the others. HFY's 4 eyes studied Jake's face. Explain. The attacks you use on me are different, more complex. You show me techniques that you do not show the other students. When you hurt me, you always make sure the injury will teach me something new. Why would I do such a thing? Jake met the instructor's gaze directly. Because you are preparing me for something specific. HFY walked to the center of the room and sat down on the mat, folding his 4 arms across his chest. Sit, he said. Jake sat facing the instructor, maintaining a respectful distance. In 600 years of teaching, HFY said, I have trained over 10,000 students. Warriors from every species in the galaxy have learned from me. Do you know how many have ever landed a significant blow during training? No, sir. 37. And of those 37, 36 were species known for their natural fighting ability. Large, strong, fast, with natural weapons. Jake waited. You are the 37th, HFY said. A human, small, weak, soft, no natural armor, no claws, no enhanced strength. And yet you have done what creatures twice your size could not do. I had good teachers, Jake said. You had pain, HFY corrected, and you learned from it instead of being broken by it. This is unusual, even for your species. The instructor leaned forward slightly. Tell me, human Jake Morrison, what do you think the purpose of this program truly is? Jake had been wondering about that for weeks. The official explanation was that the program trained elite warriors for galactic defense. But he had begun to suspect there was more to it. I think you are looking for something specific, Jake said. Not just good fighters. Something else. What? Leaders. People who can take different species and make them work together. People who can adapt to any situation and find a way to win. HFY was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded slowly. The galaxy is changing, he said. New threats are emerging from the dark spaces between stars. Threats that require more than just individual strength to defeat. They require cooperation between species that have been enemies for centuries. They require tactical thinking that goes beyond traditional warfare. The instructor stood up, his full height making him seem to tower over Jake, even though they were both sitting. The Kavari have been the galaxy's premier warriors for 1,000 years, HFY said. But we are not teachers. We are not diplomats. We do not adapt well to new situations. These are human strengths, Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What are you saying? I am saying that the universe may soon need warriors who can do more than just fight. Warriors who can lead others, who can find new solutions to impossible problems, who can unite different species against common threats. Vex High walked toward the door, then paused. Tomorrow, your real training begins, he said. What you have experienced so far was merely preparation. Now I will teach you everything I know about combat, tactics, leadership, and war. And when I am finished, you will be ready for what is coming. Jake watched the instructor leave, his mind racing with questions. What threats was Vex High talking about? What was coming that required such preparation? But underneath the questions, Jake felt something else. For the first time since arriving at the station, he felt like he truly understood his purpose here. Broken nose, the constant injuries, the psychological pressure. It had all been designed to forge him into something new, something the galaxy might need. He stood up and returned to his training, but now every movement had new meaning. He was no longer just trying to survive the program dot. He was preparing for war. The 5th month of training was unlike anything Jake had experienced before. Vex High kept his promise. The brutal demonstrations stopped, replaced by intensive private lessons that pushed Jake to his absolute limits. The instructor taught him advanced Kavari combat techniques that were normally kept secret from other species. He showed Jake tactical concepts that required understanding the psychology of dozens of different alien races. Most importantly, Vex High began testing Jake's leadership abilities in ways that were both subtle and dangerous. Your final examination begins today, Vex High announced to the remaining 15 students. You will work in teams of 3. Each team will face a series of challenges designed to test everything you have learned. Jake was paired with Zeph and a Thorian warrior named Grixpak. The Thorian was 8 feet tall and covered in natural armor. But Jake had learned that Grixpak was also intelligent and surprisingly gentle for his species. First challenge, Vex High said, leading them to a chamber filled with deadly obstacles. Navigate this course while carrying your wounded teammate. Zeph was designated as the injured party and given a device that would cause intense pain if he tried to use his legs. Jake and Grixpak had to carry him through a maze of spinning blades, pit traps, and energy barriers. I should carry him, Grixpak said. I am strongest. No, Jake said, studying the course. Look at the obstacles. They are designed for someone your size to fail. The gaps are too narrow. The handholds too small. We need to work together differently. Jake's plan was complex, but effective. Grixpak would clear the largest obstacles with his strength. Jake would handle the precision work. That required smaller size and human flexibility. Zeph would serve as their spotter, watching for dangers they might miss while concentrating on their tasks. They completed the course in record time. Impressive, Vex High said. But that was only the beginning. The challenges grew progressively. Harder. Combat scenarios that required fighting while protecting civilians. Strategic puzzles that demanded cooperation between species with conflicting instincts. Leadership tests where Jake had to convince other students to follow plans that seemed impossible. Jake excelled at all of them, but he began to notice something troubling. Vex High was watching him with an expression that seemed almost sad. What is wrong? Jake asked after one particularly difficult exercise. Nothing is wrong, Vex High said. That is the problem. Jake did not understand, but he did not have time to think about it. The final challenge was announced the next day. Single combat, Vex High said. Each remaining student will face an opponent chosen specifically for them. Jake watched as his classmates fought their battles. Some won, some lost, but all fought bravely. Lisa faced a creature that moved like liquid metal, and barely managed to win through clever use of electrical charges. Zeph fought an opponent twice his size and lost, but showed courage that impressed even the instructors. "Jake Morrison," HFY called finally, "your opponent is ready." Jake walked to the center of the combat area, expecting to see another student, or perhaps one of the junior instructors. Instead, he found HFY waiting for him. "Sir?" Jake said, confused. "Your final test," HFY said, "is me." The other students and instructors gathered around the combat area. Jake could see confusion on their faces. This was not normal procedure. "I do not understand," Jake said. "For 5 months I have trained you," HFY said. "I have taught you everything I know about combat, tactics, and leadership. Now I must know if the student has surpassed the teacher." HFY moved into a fighting stance that Jake had never seen before. All 4 of his arms were positioned differently, creating a defensive pattern that looked impenetrable. "This is not a training exercise," HFY said. "This is real combat. Fight me as if your life depends on it, because it does." Jake felt his heart rate increase, but his mind remained calm. This was what all the training had been leading to. Not just the physical preparation, but the mental conditioning that allowed him to think clearly under extreme pressure. The fight began with explosive violence. HFY attacked with speed and power that made his previous demonstrations look gentle. Jake barely managed to avoid the first combination, rolling away as 4 fists smashed the floor where he had been standing. But Jake had advantages now that he had not possessed 5 months ago. His body had adapted to the station's environment, making him faster and stronger than any human had a right to be. His mind had learned to process information at superhuman speeds, analyzing multiple threats simultaneously. Most importantly, he knew HFY better than anyone else in the galaxy. The instructor was fighting at full capacity, but Jake had been studying him for months. Every technique HFY used, Jake had seen before. Every combination had been demonstrated on Jake's own body. Jake began to counterattack, using human techniques that Vichon had never encountered. He fought dirty, using tactics that the Kavari's warrior code would never allow. He targeted the weak points in HFY's armor that he had memorized. Through painful experience, the battle raged for 20 minutes. Both fighters bled from multiple wounds. HFY's superior strength and reach kept Jake at a disadvantage, but Jake's adaptability and unorthodox tactics prevented the instructor from landing a finishing blow. Then HFY made a mistake born of frustration and pride. The instructor attempted his most powerful attack, the same technique he had used to break countless students over the centuries. All 4 arms moved in perfect coordination, seeking to crush Jake's skull. But Jake had been expecting this exact moment. He had planned for it, prepared for it, dreamed about it. Instead of dodging or blocking, Jake moved forward into the attack. He grabbed 2 of HFY's arms and used the instructor's own momentum against him, executing a throwing technique that sent the massive Kavari flying through the air. HFY landed hard on his back, and Jake heard something crack. The instructor tried to get up, but his legs would not respond. His spine had been damaged in the fall. Jake stood over his fallen instructor, breathing heavily. He could have struck a killing blow easily. HFY was helpless, paralyzed from the waist down. Instead, Jake knelt beside the injured Kavari. "Are you all right?" Jake asked. HFY looked up at him with an expression Jake had never seen before. Respect, pride, and something that might have been relief. "I am finished," HFY said. "My spine is broken. I will never fight again." "The medical bay can fix spinal injuries," Jake said. "Yes," HFY said, "but I will never be the warrior I was. My time as an instructor is over." Jake felt an unexpected wave of sadness. For 5 months, Vex High had been his tormentor, his teacher, and his greatest challenge. The idea of the instructor being unable to continue seemed wrong. "I am sorry." Jake said, "Do not be," Vex High replied. "This is what I hoped for, what I trained you for. I don't understand." Vex High smiled, an expression that looked strange on his alien features. The student was supposed to surpass the teacher. "You have done what I could not do. You have learned to be strong without being cruel, to be powerful without being proud, to win without destroying what you were fighting to protect." Jake looked around the combat area. The other students and instructors were staring at him with expressions ranging from awe to fear. He had just defeated the most feared combat instructor in the galaxy. "What happens now?" Jake asked. "Now, Vex High," sighed, "you graduate. And then you prepare for the real war that is coming." As medical personnel arrived to treat Vex High's injuries, Jake stood alone in the center of the combat area. He had won, but victory felt different than he had expected. He had not just defeated his instructor. He had become something new, something that the galaxy apparently needed. The question was, would he be strong enough for what came next? 2 days after the fight, Jake sat in a hearing room facing 5 senior officers from different species. They wore uniforms he did not recognize and carried themselves with the authority of people who made decisions that affected entire star systems. "Marine Morrison," said the ranking officer, a tall being with silver skin and no visible eyes, "you are here to answer for your actions during the final examination." Jake kept his voice steady. "Yes, sir. You severely injured Instructor Vex High during what was supposed to be a controlled combat exercise. Explain your actions." "I fought as instructed, sir. Instructor Vex High told me to fight as if my life depended on it. Did you intend to cripple the instructor?" Jake thought carefully about his answer. The truth was complex. He had known that his throwing technique could cause serious injury, but he had also known it was his only chance to win the fight. "I intended to stop the instructor from continuing his attack, sir. I used the minimum force necessary to achieve that goal." One of the other officers, a being that looked like it was made of living stone, leaned forward. "You could have killed him easily once he was down." "Why did you not?" "Because the fight was over, sir. He was no longer a threat." The officers exchanged glances. Jake could not read their expressions, but he sensed that his answers were important, in ways he did not fully understand. "We have reviewed recordings of your entire training period," the silver-skinned officer said. "Your progress has been extraordinary. In 5 months, you have mastered combat techniques that normally take years to learn. More importantly, you have demonstrated leadership qualities that are extremely rare." "Thank you, sir." "This was not a compliment," the officer said. "It was an observation. We need to understand what you have become." The door to the hearing room opened, and Vex High entered. The former instructor moved carefully, his legs supported by mechanical braces that helped him walk. His spine had been repaired, but he would never move with his old fluid grace. "I requested to speak at this hearing," Vex High said. "The ranking." Officer nodded. "Proceed, instructor." "What happened in that combat ring was not an accident," Vex High said, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "For 5 months, I trained Jake Morrison for exactly that moment. Every lesson, every injury, every challenge was designed to prepare him to defeat me." Jake stared at his former instructor in shock. "Sir?" "The Crucible program has a secret purpose," Vex High continued. "We are not just training warriors. We are searching for the one individual who can unite the galaxy's military forces against a threat that is coming from beyond our borders." Stone-like officer spoke. "Tell him about the Devourers." Vex High's expression grew dark. 3 years ago, our deep space monitors detected something moving in the void between galaxies. Ships unlike anything we have ever seen. They attack without warning, consume entire worlds, and leave nothing behind. We call them the Devourers. Jake felt his blood turn cold. How many worlds? 17 so far, HFY said. All in outer rim systems. But they are moving inward, toward the core worlds where billions live. The silver-skinned officer leaned forward. Our military analysts have studied every attack. The Devourers use tactics that exploit the weaknesses of individual species. They turn our differences against us. Traditional command structures fail because each species fights according to their own nature. What does this have to do with me? Jake asked. Humans are unique, HFY said. Your species adapts faster than any other. You learn from your enemies instead of just trying to overpower them. Most importantly, you can work with any species, even those that hate each other. We need a military commander who can unite forces from dozens of different worlds, the ranking officer said. Someone who can learn enemy tactics quickly and develop counter-strategies. Someone who can inspire troops who have never fought together before. Jake began to understand. You want me to lead a combined fleet. We want you to save the galaxy, HFY said simply. The hearing room was quiet for a long moment. Jake thought about everything he had experienced over the past 5 months. The pain, the learning, the gradual transformation from a simple Marine into something he did not fully recognize. What if I refuse? Jake asked. Then billions will die, the stone officer said. And eventually, the Devourers will reach Earth. Jake closed his eyes and thought about his home world. He thought about his family, his friends, all the people who had no idea that their world was in danger. When do I start? He asked. Immediately, the ranking officer said. Your first assignment is to select your command staff from the graduates of this program. You will need specialists from multiple species. Jake nodded. I want Lisa Park as my tactical officer. Zeph as communications specialist. Grixpak can handle heavy weapons coordination. And your senior advisor? HFY asked. Jake looked at his former instructor. HFY could no longer fight, but his knowledge of military strategy was unmatched in the galaxy. I want you, Jake said. HFY's 4 eyes widened in surprise. I am no longer the warrior I was. I don't need a warrior, Jake said. I need a teacher. Someone who understands how different species think and fight. Someone who can help me avoid the mistakes that got 17 worlds destroyed. The hearing ended with Jake's appointment as commander of the newly formed Galactic Defense Initiative. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy watched as Jake received his new rank and responsibilities. As the crowd dispersed, Jake found himself standing alone with HFY on the observation deck, overlooking Kepler Station's docking bays. Ships were already arriving, bringing volunteers from across the galaxy to serve under Jake's command. Are you ready for this? HFY asked. Jake touched his crooked nose, a permanent reminder of where his journey had begun. 5 months ago, you broke my nose on the first day of training. I remember. Today, I'm supposed to carry the backbone of our entire military defense. Jake smiled grimly. I guess I'm carrying your backbone after all. HFY made a sound. That might have been laughter. In a way, yes. But the strength you will need comes from within yourself. I merely helped you find it. A month later, Jake stood on the bridge of the GDI flagship Humanity's Shield, watching as the largest combined fleet in galactic history prepared for battle. Ships from 47 different species moved in perfect formation, their crews working together using tactics that Jake had developed during countless training sessions. Incoming transmission from the lead scout ship. Lisa Park reported from her position at the tactical station. They found the Devourer fleet. All ships, this is Commander Morrison, Jake said into the communication system. Remember your training. Trust your teammates. And let's show these things that the galaxy is not going to roll over and die. The fleet moved forward into the darkness between stars, carrying the hopes of trillions of beings. Jake thought about the broken nose that had started his transformation, about the instructor who had forged him into a weapon that could protect everything he cared about. Behind him, Vex High worked at the strategy station, his mechanical leg, braces humming softly as he moved. The former instructor had indeed become the backbone of Jake's command structure, providing the wisdom and experience that turned raw courage into effective leadership. Contact in 30 seconds. Lisa announced. Jake gripped the arms of his command chair and prepared to face the greatest challenge of his life. He had survived the Crucible program, defeated the galaxy's greatest warrior, and united dozens of different species under a single command. Now came the real test. All ships, engage the enemy, Jake ordered. The battle for the galaxy's survival had begun. As energy beams lit up the darkness and ships maneuvered in three-dimensional combat. Jake Morrison, the human who had refused to quit when his nose was broken on the first day of training, led the combined forces of civilization against an enemy that sought to devour everything they held dear. The instructor had broken the human's nose on day one. The human had finished the course carrying not just the instructor's backbone, but the backbone of galactic civilization itself, and he would not let it break.